People say life changes slowly, over months, years, decisions stacking quietly. They're wrong. Sometimes your life changes in the 3 seconds it takes for someone to knock on your door at the wrong hour. It was 11:47 p.m. when the knock came, too late for neighbors, too early for emergencies. I was halfway through a cup of tea, half watching an old talk show rerun, when the sound jolted the quiet like a crack in glass. 3 knocks. Slow. Hesitant. Not the rhythm of someone confident. I didn't rush to answer. At my age, you learn that trouble usually begins with people who look lost. When I finally opened the door, the hallway light fell across a small boy standing alone. 5 years old. Too thin. Backpack hanging off one shoulder like it belonged to someone older. His hair was wind-mussed as if he'd walked a long distance. And his eyes, wide. Dry, not crying, just staring at me as if scanning my face for recognition. Behind him, the hallway was empty. "Grandma," he whispered. My heart did something strange. Froze first, then dropped. I hadn't seen Ethan in nearly 3 years. The last time Rachel brought him over, she stayed for 12 rushed minutes, tapping her phone the whole time, promising to return later that week. She never did. And now he was here. Alone. Before I could speak, he stepped inside quietly, almost mechanically, like someone following a rehearsed instruction. "Where's your mother?" I asked, soft but urgent. He didn't answer. He didn't shrug either. He simply placed his backpack on the floor, unzipped it slowly, and took out a small yellow plastic cup, a cup I remembered giving him when he was 2. He set it on my coffee table with a precision that felt older than him. Something felt wrong. Too wrong. "Sweetheart," I tried again, "did she drop you off?" He didn't nod or shake his head. Instead, he examined the edges of the coffee table, trailing a finger along one corner, as if checking its shape. He sat on the rug and pulled his knees to his chest, not crying, not frightened exactly, but focused inward, like the world around him was too loud. "Was anyone with you?" I asked. Still nothing. But then he murmured, almost to himself, "She said you'd know what to do." My stomach clenched. Rachel had many faults, but abandoning her son at midnight on a cold hallway carpet wasn't one I ever believed she could reach. And yet here he was. No code. No note. No explanation. I locked the door. Double-checked it. Ethan watched every movement, not emotionally, but analytically, his eyes tracking tiny details. When the bolt slid into place, he exhaled like it mattered. That was the first sign, subtle but unmistakable, that this wasn't just a late night drop-off. Something had frightened him, even if he couldn't, or wouldn't, say what. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He didn't answer, but he stood, walked to the kitchen, and opened the refrigerator like he lived here. He looked at the shelves, each item, perfectly aligned, then reached for the same vanilla yogurt he used to eat as a toddler. Routine. Familiarity. His world was built from those things. He ate in silence. Slow, precise bites. I pretended to tidy the counter while watching for cues, fear, confusion, exhaustion. But he was quiet. Controlled. Too controlled for a child who should have been terrified. After he finished, he placed the spoon next to the sink, aligning it with the counter's edge, and whispered, "She told me not to make noise." That was when the real fear hit, not for me, but for him. "Who told you that?" I asked gently. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then his shoulders tensed, not in fear, but in memory. Without looking at me, he whispered, "Mom," before she left. A chill threaded down my spine. Left where? Why? For how long? I didn't press him further. Not at midnight, not while he stood trembling in the dim kitchen light, not when each answer seemed to cost him something. So I wrapped a blanket around him and lay beside him on the couch until his breathing softened into sleep. But I didn't sleep. Because that night, I understood something with a clarity that froze my blood. Rachel hadn't dropped him off. She had disappeared. And she had left Ethan behind with a warning in his bones. I didn't know it then, but the night Ethan returned wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning. And the next morning, when he finally spoke more than a whisper, he told me the first piece of a puzzle that would unravel both our lives. Ethan woke before I did. I found him sitting at the dining table in the soft gray of early morning, legs crossed on the chair, the yellow cup positioned exactly 1 inch from his left hand. He wasn't playing. He wasn't exploring. He was waiting. Still as stone, eyes fixed on the door as if he expected someone to walk through it. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said gently. He didn't look at me right away. He raised one finger, pointing toward the hardwood floor. Not accusing, observing. I followed his gaze. A faint trail of dried mud curved from the entryway to the living room. Small shoe prints. His size. But one single, larger print overlapped a few of his. Adult-sized. He must have stepped on it last night without realizing. A chill slid up my spine. "Did someone come in with you?" I asked carefully. He didn't answer, not with words. He only brought his knees to his chest, rocking once, then stopping himself abruptly, as if remembering he wasn't supposed to move too much. Routine. Restriction. Instruction. Someone had trained him to make himself small. I sat beside him. "You're safe here," I whispered. He blinked at me, slow, deliberate, and finally turned his body toward breakfast. That was his answer, or the closest he could give. I scrambled eggs, toasted bread, made tea. He ate mechanically, every motion precise, as if he were afraid of doing something wrong. The moment the plate scraped slightly on the table, he flinched, not dramatically, but enough for me to see a history of too loud rooms, too sharp voices, too many corrections. I softened my tone further. "Ethan, can you tell me what happened last night?" A long pause. Then, without looking up, he murmured, "She put me out of the car." My breath caught. "Why?" He shrugged, small, fragile, unsure. But then he added, very quietly, "She had to go." "Go where?" Another shrug. Then, in a whisper shaped like fear, "She said they'd find us if she didn't." The sentence hit the room like a dropped plate. Sharp, shocking, irreversible. I kept my voice calm. "Who would find you?" He touched the yellow cup again, lightly, then shook his head as if the very idea of describing it was dangerous. That was when I realized, whatever frightened Rachel wasn't simple. This wasn't abandonment born of impulse. There was something else at play: fear, pressure, secrecy. And Ethan had absorbed more of it than any child should. After breakfast, he wandered the apartment with silent familiarity, gravitating toward corners he used to hide in during thunderstorms. He sat under the small hallway table, legs folded, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. It was the first peaceful moment since he arrived. While he sat there, I made calls: school, social worker, pediatric clinic. I didn't dramatize the situation. I simply said my grandson had returned unexpectedly and needed evaluation. Appointments would take time, but I didn't mind. Time meant stability. At noon, I brought him warm milk. He accepted it without words. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "did your mother say anything else before she left?" He hesitated, looking at the door again. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, fear, memory. "She said," his voice thinned. "She said I should stay quiet until I understood the rules." "What rules?" He pressed his forehead to his knees. "Patterns." The word didn't fit a 5-year-old's vocabulary. Not normally. But for Ethan, it felt honest. Something he'd been taught or forced to learn. "What kind of patterns?" I whispered. He lifted his head slightly, eyes scanning the living room, the door, the windows, as if mapping invisible lines across the apartment. "The kind you don't talk about." I felt my pulse in my throat. This wasn't just trauma. This wasn't just fear. This was a child carrying a secret too heavy for him. I reached into his backpack, hoping for clues. Inside were a half-empty water bottle, a single pair of socks, a folded supermarket receipt, and a plain white envelope with no writing. I opened it carefully. Inside was a key. No note. No address. No explanation. Ethan, I said quietly, do you know what this unlocks? He shook his head, but then, without warning, he reached forward and placed his small palm flat over mine, covering the key. Not affectionate, not emotional, purposeful, as if telling me, this matters. Don't lose it. My breath trembled, because Rachel leaving her son at my door was one mystery. But leaving him with a key, that meant something else entirely. Later that evening, Ethan finally spoke a full sentence, one that changed everything I thought I knew about that night. A sentence that made the key in my hand feel suddenly, terrifyingly important. For most of the afternoon, Ethan drifted between the living room and the hallway table, like a quiet tide. He wasn't restless, just watchful. Every time I moved from one room to another, his eyes followed, not out of fear but out of calculation, as if he were checking that the world behaved the way he expected. The plain silver key sat on the coffee table between us. I didn't touch it again. Not until I understood why Rachel had trusted a 5-year-old with something adults normally guard tightly. Ethan, I said gently, did your mom ever show you what this key is for? He shook his head. No anxiety. No hesitation. Just a simple, factual no. Did she tell you to keep it safe? Another small nod. But she didn't say why? He looked at me, and for the first time since he arrived, his eyes weren't blank or distant. They were trying to pull up a memory, trying to decide how much he was allowed to say. His small hands tightened on his knees. She said, he whispered carefully, she said not to open anything unless I had help. Help with what? He swallowed hard. With everything. The vagueness scared me more than any direct explanation would have. I wanted to press him, but I could see his breathing change, slightly faster, shallow at the top of his chest, a sign he was overwhelmed. So I stopped. Pushing him would only make him retreat, and I needed him grounded, not lost in fear. Instead, I shifted the energy. How about we draw? I asked. He blinked, surprised. Drawing wasn't avoiding the conversation, it was offering him a safer way to express it. I brought out a sheet of white paper and a box of crayons. He didn't choose a color. Instead, he turned the box around, studying each label as if memorizing them. Then he picked gray. Not blue, not red. Gray. He began with straight lines, slow, deliberate strokes, forming shapes that looked nothing like houses or trees or people. They looked like layouts, rooms, hallways, spaces, floor plans. I watched silently. After a few minutes, his hand paused. He tapped one square shape 3 times. Then he circled it. What's that? I asked softly. He didn't answer with words. He pushed the key toward the circled square. My blood chilled. It wasn't a child's drawing. It was a place. A real place. And the key belonged to it. Sweetheart, I said gently, have you been there? He shook his head no. Did your mom go there? A pause. His fingers curled slightly. Then, a small nod. This was the first concrete clue. A real location. A real connection. But I didn't want to overwhelm him, so I folded the drawing neatly and placed it under the key. We'll figure this out together, I assured him. He relaxed, not fully, but noticeably. His shoulders dropped half an inch. His eyes softened. After dinner, we settled into the couch. The TV played softly in the background, more for comfort than entertainment. Ethan sat with his knees drawn up, watching the flicker of light rather than the show itself. Then, without any prompt, he spoke. She told me to listen for matching sounds. I leaned closer. What kind of sounds? Cars, he said quietly. Engines. Steps. Steps. He nodded. Mom said if the steps didn't match the doors, we had to leave. This wasn't paranoia. It wasn't fantasy. This was a child repeating survival instructions. My heart tightened. Whatever Rachel had been running from, she had taught Ethan to. Read danger in the world around him. Patterns. Sounds. Timing. Things a 5-year-old shouldn't even think about. What happened before she left you at my door? I whispered. He pressed his forehead to his knees. The steps were wrong. That sentence, it wasn't dramatic, but it was devastating. It painted a picture more frightening than anything else he could have said. I stroked his back gently. You did the right thing coming here. He didn't reply, but his breathing steadied. Later that night, after he finally fell asleep on the couch, I unfolded the drawing again. The floor plan was too precise to be from imagination. 4 rooms, 2 doors, a staircase, and the circled shape at the center. A storage room, a closet, a safe. The key sparkled under the lamp. When I turned the paper over, I found something I hadn't noticed before. 3 small numbers, written faintly in pencil in Ethan's tidy, methodical handwriting. 204. I stared at it for a long time. An apartment number? A storage locker? A room in a building? Ethan had said only one sentence with complete clarity all day. She said not to open anything unless I had help. And now I finally understood why. The next morning, Ethan told me the one detail that changed the meaning of the number 204 and turned the key from a mystery into a warning. Ethan woke earlier than usual the next morning, padding softly into the kitchen while I was pouring cereal. His hair stuck up on one side, but his expression was unusually alert, focused, as if he had made a decision during the night. He slid into the chair, knees pulled up, eyes fixed on the folded drawing I'd set near the fruit bowl. I placed the cereal in front of him. Good morning, sweetheart. He didn't pick up the spoon. Instead, he pressed one finger against the drawing and said quietly, 204 isn't a room. I froze with my hand still on the cereal box. It's not. I asked gently. Then what is it? He took a breath, small but deliberate. It's a time. A time for what? He pointed to the circled square on his floor plan sketch. Then to the key. Then he whispered. That's when she heard the steps. My stomach dropped. Ethan, what happened at 204? He folded into himself slightly, rocking once before stopping, self-regulating, containing something he didn't want to relive. She said the steps started at 204. Too early. Too slow. Slow. I repeated. He nodded. Slow means searching. My skin prickled. Sweetheart, who was searching? He didn't look up. He didn't need to. Mom said they were. It was the first time he had referred to whoever they might be without hesitation. I didn't push him further. Not yet. I needed to build trust, not trigger fear. Instead, I asked gently, did your mom say where she was going? He shook his head. But after a moment, he added, she said she had to stop them from coming to you. That sentence didn't just unsettle me, it rearranged everything I thought I knew about Rachel's disappearance. If she was running, why mention me? Had something led them here before? Or had Rachel always planned to send Ethan to me as a last resort? I didn't have answers. Only the sinking feeling that whatever frightened her wasn't new. After breakfast, I decided to take out the trash. I didn't want to leave Ethan alone even for a minute, so I coaxed him into slipping on his shoes and walking the short hallway with me. He stayed close, fist curled around my sweater hem. The corridor was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint sound of someone's radio behind a closed door. As we walked, Ethan suddenly stopped. Not froze, stopped, like an alarm had gone off inside him. His head tilted slightly. Listening. Ethan, I whispered. He held up a hand, small, trembling only at the fingertips. Then, don't go. I followed his gaze. Halfway down the corridor, near the stairwell, stood a man I had never seen before. Mid-40s, average height, a jacket too heavy for the warm morning. He wasn't doing anything wrong. Not loitering, not threatening. He was just standing. But his eyes were fixed on the door of my apartment. A cold ripple went through me. He noticed us watching and nodded politely, as if he were a visitor waiting for someone. Harmless. Normal. But Ethan's grip tightened around my sweater, so tight the fabric pinched my skin. He whispered, barely audible. "That's the walk." "What walk?" I murmured. "The one she said to watch for." I forced myself to stay calm, to not scare Ethan, even as my pulse hammered in my ears. "Come on, sweetheart," I said softly. "Let's go back inside." The man didn't move as we turned around. Didn't speak. Didn't step forward. Which, in an odd way, made it worse. Once inside, I locked the door, once, twice, then the chain. Ethan stayed in the entryway, listening. "Did he scare you?" I asked. He shook his head. "Then what's wrong?" He placed both hands against the door and whispered. He was counting. Counting what? Footsteps. Breaths. Timing. Anything could have fit the word. Ethan answered without lifting his head. "The distance." A chill washed through me. I knelt beside him. "You're safe. You're here. No one is coming in." He didn't relax. Not yet. Instead, he pointed to the key again. "Mom said if someone finds us," his throat tightened, "we have to use it." "Use it how?" His bottom lip trembled, not from crying, but from holding something back. "It takes us to the place she left for us." A place. Not a room. Not a locker. A place. And suddenly, the floor plan made more sense. The shapes weren't random. They were familiar, architectural. A stairwell. A corridor. A central room. But we didn't know which building. Or why Rachel had access to it. Or why she'd prepared it long before this night. I placed my hand gently over his. "We'll find it," I promised. "Together." He didn't smile, but he finally breathed more evenly. Later that evening, while Ethan rested on the couch with a blanket pulled to his chin, I unfolded the drawing once more. I looked at the key, the numbers, 204, the circled room. Then I saw something I had missed before, so faint it was barely visible. A tiny arrow drawn in the corner of the page, pointing upward. A direction. Not a room. Not a time. An upper floor. The next day, we would visit the first building that matched Ethan's drawing. And it was there, standing in a quiet stairwell, that we found the first undeniable sign that Rachel had been there before us. It took most of the morning to figure out which building Ethan had drawn. The sketch wasn't detailed enough to identify a specific place, but the layout, 4 rooms arranged around a narrow corridor, a stairwell offset to the left, matched older apartment blocks built in our city in the late 80s. I flipped through property records, old maps, and a few online listings until I found 3 buildings with nearly identical blueprints. 3 possibilities. 3 places Rachel might have gone. 3 places someone might still be watching. I didn't want to take Ethan with me, not after the man in the corridor. But leaving him alone wasn't an option. So I asked our neighbor, Mrs. Shaw, a warm, steady woman, who'd known Ethan when he was a toddler, if she could sit with him for an hour. He agreed after a moment's hesitation, only because I told him exactly where I was going, which floor, which entrance, what time I'd be back. He listened as if logging every detail into a system only he understood. "Don't open the door," I reminded him. He nodded. "I'll check the steps." His wording still sent a cold ripple through me every time. But I didn't correct it. Not today. Building 1 was a 15-minute walk away. Old elevators, narrow hallways, faded paint. I didn't immediately recognize anything, and a young mother carrying groceries smiled politely as she passed. Everything felt normal. Too normal. The second building was quieter. A retired couple stood in the lobby discussing medical bills. The layout was similar to the drawing, but the stairwell was on the right, not the left. Close, but not exact. Then I reached Building 3. The moment I stepped inside, my skin prickled, not from fear but from recognition. This was it. The wallpaper along the corridor matched Ethan's drawing, the pattern of small, overlapping rectangles. The width of the hallway felt right, narrow enough that my shoulder brushed the wall if I turned slightly. 4 doors on each side. And the stairwell, exactly where Ethan had placed it. Offset. Left aligned. The arrow he drew suddenly made sense. It pointed up. I ascended 1 flight, then another, my heartbeat thudding quietly under my coat. As I reached the 3rd floor, the fluorescent lights flickered in a familiar way, the same rhythm that had bothered Ethan the night he arrived. Part of me prayed I'd find nothing. That Rachel had never been here, that this was all a misinterpretation, that the world was smaller, simpler, safer. But when I stepped into the 3rd floor corridor, I saw it. A small mark, barely visible, drawn low on the wall beside the stairwell door. A vertical line with a short cross through the center. The kind of mark a person might make to track something. A signal. A message too subtle to attract attention but obvious to someone looking for confirmation. I crouched down and traced it lightly. Fresh. Pencil, not pen. And faint smudging, recent rubbing, maybe from a sleeve. Brushing past. Days old. Weeks. Hard to say. My chest tightened. Rachel had been here. Not years ago. Recently. A sudden click behind me made me turn sharply. But it was just a woman stepping out of an apartment with a laundry basket. She gave me a brief polite nod, oblivious to the tremor in my hands. I moved down the corridor slowly, counting the doors. Room 301, 302, 303. Then I reached it. A door painted pale blue. Slight scuffs around the handle. A new lock. And on the floor, in front of it, pressed almost against the trim, was a faint imprint. A small shoe print. A child's size. Ethan's size. I knelt, heart pounding, and touched the print gently. The dust pattern was undisturbed. Whoever left it hadn't been back. I didn't knock. Whoever might answer wasn't someone I wanted to meet by surprise. Instead, I leaned closer and examined the doorframe. There, on the metal plate, was a scrape. Thin. Fresh. A mark from a key that didn't quite fit. Rachel's key. The key Ethan carried? My pulse quickened. I slid the silver key from my pocket. I didn't insert it, just held it near the lock. Same shape. Similar alignment. This was the door. I whispered into the still hallway. What were you trying to unlock, Rachel? I took a long breath, memorizing every detail. The soft hum of the lights, the faint scent of detergent, the distant clatter of a neighbor washing dishes. Then I left. Quietly. No heroics. No risks. Just observation, the same way Ethan observed the world. When I returned home, Ethan was on the couch, knees tucked under him, watching the front door the way a guard watches a gate. You came back at the right time, he murmured. What time was that? 58 minutes. He had tracked my absence to the second. I sat beside him, showing him the folded drawing again. Sweetheart, I said gently, I found something. He lifted his head, eyes sharp with expectation rather than fear. What did she leave? He whispered. Not did she go there. Not was she safe. Not did you see her. What did she leave? As if he already knew Rachel hadn't gone there to hide. She had gone there to leave something behind. The next morning, Ethan pointed to a new detail in his drawing, one I hadn't noticed before. A small square in the corner of the floor plan, marking something he called the quiet room. And that was where the real discovery waited. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. I could tell because every time I rolled over, I heard the soft creak of the couch as he shifted, never fully waking, but never sinking into deep rest either. His mind was working, processing, stitching details together like a quiet machine that never truly shut down. At sunrise, he sat at the dining table with the drawing again. The key lay beside it, glinting faintly in the morning light. He tapped a tiny square in the upper corner, the one I'd assumed was just part of the hallway. "This is the quiet room," he said softly. "What makes it quiet?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "No windows, no vents, no echo." That wasn't something a child guessed. It was something he remembered being told. "Did your mother show you this place?" I asked gently, careful not to overwhelm him. He shook his head. "She said she hid things where noise couldn't get in." Noise couldn't get in. The phrase made my stomach twist. A storage unit, a maintenance room, a sealed-off space in an older building? His sketch certainly looked like one. I studied the crude square again. There, barely noticeable, was a faint pencil line, leading from the room's edge to the circled square in the center of the drawing. A path. A sequence. Ethan had drawn a map, not a picture, and there was intention behind its layout. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "would you come with me today? Show me the quiet room." He held the yellow cup tighter. His brow furrowed, not fear, but calculation. Finally, he nodded once. "We go when the steps aren't wrong." I swallowed hard. "Tell me when that is." We left at 10:32 a.m., a time Ethan declared safe after listening to the hallway for several minutes. He didn't explain his reasoning, but I trusted him. Not because he was magical or uncanny, but because his entire life had been shaped by noticing patterns most people ignore: sound intervals, pacing rhythms, micro changes in the environment. Trauma teaches those skills. Autism amplifies them. Fear sharpens them. The bus ride was quiet. Ethan sat with his knees tucked close, eyes tracking the passing streets. At Building 3, he hesitated only once, at the entrance, then slipped inside. Like he had already memorized the building's pulse. Up the stairs. 3rd floor. Left hall. He stopped abruptly halfway down the corridor. "There," he whispered. He pointed to a small utility door almost flush with the wall, so inconspicuous I might have walked past it without noticing. No number on it. No sign. Just a metal panel with a basic lock. The quiet room. I looked around. No footsteps. No voices. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clatter of someone's TV behind a closed door. "Does the key work here?" I whispered. Ethan held his breath, then handed me the silver key with both hands, as if transferring responsibility rather than an object. I slid the key into the lock. It turned. Not smoothly, there was resistance, but after a soft click, the door eased open a few inches. Inside was darkness. Cold, airless darkness. I pushed the door wider, letting the light seep in. The room was barely larger than a closet. Concrete walls, no windows, no ventilation shaft. Exactly as Ethan had described, quiet in a way that felt unnatural. A faint scuff on the floor caught my eye. I knelt. A box had been dragged recently. Not far, just enough to create a mark. Ethan crouched beside me, peering into the shadowed corner. "There," he whispered. A small metal lockbox sat pressed against the wall. Old, dented, but not abandoned. A strip of red tape sealed it shut, and faint pencil writing, almost erased, marked the lid. "For Mom only." My breath hitched. Rachel had left this for me. But why? I reached toward the lockbox, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Before I touched it, footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Slow. Measured. Ethan stiffened immediately. "That's wrong," he murmured. I stood quickly, shielding him with my body. The steps grew louder, not rushing, not creeping, just steady. The same pace as the man in my corridor. Same rhythm. Same timing. Someone turned into the hallway. A shadow passed the wall before the figure fully emerged. It was him. The same man from outside my apartment. Same jacket. Same unreadable calm. This time, he wasn't pretending not to notice us. His eyes landed on the open utility door, then on the lockbox, then on Ethan. His expression didn't change, but something in the air did, the way tension changes. Just before a storm breaks. I stepped forward, blocking Ethan entirely. "Can I help you?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. He didn't answer. He took one step closer. Ethan grabbed the back of my coat and whispered. He followed the pattern. The man's gaze flicked to Ethan, a brief, sharp calculation. Then he spoke for the first time. "You shouldn't have opened that." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Because now I knew. Rachel hadn't left Ethan with a key. She had left him with a warning. Before I could close the utility door, the man stepped toward us, and what he said next revealed the real reason Rachel ran, and why she believed Ethan was the only one who could find what she hid. The man stepped closer, not rushing, not threatening, but with a confidence that said, he already knew too much. His eyes flicked again toward the lockbox, then back to me. "You shouldn't have opened that," he repeated quietly. I kept my body between him and Ethan, my hand resting lightly behind me so Ethan knew I was there, solid, unmoving. "I don't know who you are," I said, "but you need to step back." He raised his hands slightly, not surrender, not aggression. Just enough to show he wasn't here to fight. "I'm not your enemy," he said. "I'm here because Rachel trusted me once." My breath caught. The hallway felt suddenly too small, too narrow. Ethan pressed himself against the wall behind me, eyes darting between the man's face in his hands, tracking micro-movements the way some people track language. "You knew my daughter?" I asked carefully. The man hesitated, just enough to signal discomfort. "I worked with her before things went wrong." That word, before, carried more weight than the rest of the sentence. Ethan tugged once at my sleeve. A signal. I shifted slightly so my hand brushed his. A signal back. "I'm here." The man glanced at Ethan. "She told me if anything happened to her, I'd know where to look." He nodded toward the lockbox. "And here we are." I didn't move. I didn't let him get closer. "If she trusted you," I said steadily, "why did she leave her son with me and not with you?" He didn't falter this time. "Because she knew they were watching me." The word they lingered in the air like smoke. "Who?" I pressed. He exhaled slowly. "People who wanted what she was building. People who don't like losing control." Ethan's voice emerged in a whisper behind me. "The steps." The man nodded, almost respectfully. "Your mother taught you well." I felt Ethan recoil, not physically, but inside himself. He didn't like that the man knew. Rachel didn't trust that connection. I didn't either. "Tell me what's inside the box," I said. "I don't know," he replied. Rachel kept it separate from everything else. Hidden. Hard. Copies only. She said digital copies were too easy to track. That was believable. Rachel had always been cautious, paranoid at times, but never wrong about danger. "Then why come here now?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because someone else came looking for it last week. They were too close." I tried to misdirect them, but he paused. "They know this building. They know she left something here. And they know you have the key." I felt a tight coil form in my chest. "What do they want?" I asked, even though I already understood the outline of the answer. "They want what she built," he said simply. "A system she designed. Not a weapon, not something explosive, something subtle, something dangerous because it predicts patterns in human behavior better than anything they have." I didn't need details. I didn't want them. "Ethan doesn't have it," I said sharply. "I know," he answered. "That's why they want the box. They think she stored the last pieces here." Ethan stepped closer, pressing into my side. He's lying, he whispered, not emotionally, but diagnostically, like someone identifying an incorrect variable. The man looked pained. I'm not lying. I'm trying to stop them. Then leave, I said. Now. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, stepped back, and said something that chilled me. They won't stop because you close this door. Be careful who you trust. Then he turned, walked down the hall, and disappeared around the stairwell corner. I waited, listening, for his footsteps. Ethan listened too, his head tilted slightly, tracking distance and rhythm. Only when the pattern faded into the building's hum did he whisper. He didn't follow the wrong steps. What does that mean? I asked. Ethan swallowed. He wasn't the one from before. My breath froze. There's someone else? He nodded, fear tightening his shoulders. The one Mom was scared of. The one who searched. I closed the utility door, heart pounding. The lockbox felt heavier than metal, heavier than secrets. Ethan slipped his small hand into mine. What if we don't open it? I asked softly. He looked up at me, calm, quiet, resolute. Mom said you would know when. His trust nearly broke me. We didn't open the box that day, or the day after. Instead, we brought it home, placed it in a fireproof safe, and notified our lawyer. Quietly, privately. Not the police. Not the building. Not anyone who might alert the wrong person. We started doing what Rachel had done. Watching. Listening. Moving carefully. Not out of paranoia, out of preparation. Because the man in the stairwell wasn't the threat. He was only the first sign that the real threat was drawing closer, following steps. Rachel had been running from long before she left Ethan at my door. And 3 days later, when a letter with no return address appeared under my door, containing nothing but a single phrase, I understood exactly what Rachel feared. You have what belongs to us.